Football is back. Today we're going to be previewing the first day of 2024 Chargers training camp. Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert, that era officially starts now, going into the most anticipated training camp in franchise history.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 9 seasons. This is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, the long, disgusting offseason is now over. Football is officially back, and I could not be any more excited to see Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh and all of the new things that we have to see at training camp. But we're going to take a look at what the Chargers are going to do with the pads off, what the things we're paying attention to, and then the things that we want to see when the pads come on.
Because we know that is all different for different people. We won't know about Joe Alt until he gets a one-on-one versus a Joey Bosa or a Khalil Mack. That is when we will know. But today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. David, this feels different. We've covered 9 training camps as the hosts of the Locked On Chargers podcast with Chargers Domination Live. We've been doing this for a long time.
Yes.
This is the most anticipated training camp in my lifetime. Getting to see Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh and the potential changing of the tide, a changing of the guard, a departure from mediocrity and letdowns. It feels like it all comes together today. The Chargers have a long way to go if they want to be a playoff contending team, if they really want to turn this ship around and show that they're not going to waste the career of another golden era, golden armed quarterback like Justin Herbert. It starts today, training camp under Jim Harbaugh, which should be much different than what we've seen in years past. And I'm so excited that we get to see it all unfold today.
No more first-time head coaches, no more guys that are learning on the job. You have a real, legitimate head coach with a winning track record that is running the ship for the first time since Marty Schottenheimer. And that's, 20-plus years. So the Chargers finally have somebody you can get excited about. You can feel like, okay, the ownership went out there and they got the guy we all wanted. Now we have to see the results. The journey, it definitely doesn't start here. It definitely is going to be the beginning of something very beautiful, hopefully, en route to hopefully the Chargers' first Lombardi trophy, but it all starts at training camp day 1.
Yeah, and to me, David, it just feels like this is such a recharging for the fans.
Yes.
Right? Like it feels like the fans are willing to buy in again. It feels like Jim Harbaugh brings hope. He brings kind of, bandages for the wounds. Like he makes you, as sickening as it is, forget about all the kind of heartbreak that this team has given you in the past and makes you have the feeling that things can be different under Jim Harbaugh. It was 22 years ago is when Marty Schottenheimer opened up his first training camp. This is the first time you've had a legitimate winning, great coach at your disposal going into a training camp. And that means something, especially you add in the fact that they're doing it at the Bowl, a brand new hundreds of $1 million training facility. And also just kind of the vibe, the electricity, no pun intended, around this. Like this feels important. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how things have changed from last year to this year. Thank God we're not covering another Brandon Staley training camp, right? And I think it's really, really interesting to see how it changes. And we've already seen that a little bit, David, because the scheduling has already changed. Like that is something that's already different under Jim Harbaugh. And I think Ben Herbert probably has something to do with it too, where make sure you know what your ticket says if you're going to Chargers training camp, because it's not like a 9 a.m. start every single day like it's been in years past. Every single practice is 24 hours plus after the last practice ended. So, for example, the first practice ends at 11. The next day, it doesn't start again till 12, right? Like, that is interesting. Maximum recovery, maximum recuperation, already seeing some changes in that regard.
I absolutely love it too. And I think, yeah, definitely Ben Herbert has something to do with that. I mean, that's right up his alley, right? He wants to try to make these guys harder to break, but not just training is a part of that, philosophy there. Recovery is a key aspect of that as well. You want to try to get as many of your players to week 1 as humanly possible, as healthy as possible. So maximizing the rest in between these training camp practices that we know are going to be a lot more physical, a lot more demanding, a lot more of the cardio, a lot more of the busting your butt, because that's what Jim Harbaugh demands. That's the style of football that you want to impose. Well, it doesn't just happen. You have to work for it, and the Chargers are going to do that. But I love that they're fixing in the rest as part of that philosophy.
And if you want to get the most out of all these players and you want them to be the most attentive and to pick things up the quickest and to give their full physically, that's what you have to do. And I love the fact that they're already kind of switching things up. Like, do I know how much exactly it changes? No. But do I think that the more rest you get in between practices, the better? Absolutely. Yes. And it restarts every time there's an off day, then they go back to the morning. So there's always 24 plus hours in between when they're training, which I think is great. I think you're going to see that pay dividends for the performances we're going to see in training camp. But really another just gigantic thing we get to see, David, going into training camp today, something I'm so excited to see, a healthy, reinvigorated Justin Herbert. That is, to me, one of the absolute top things on the list of why I'm excited for today's training camp to open up.
Justin Herbert was on stage singing with his teammates. He was out at some celebrity softball games. He was a lot more present, a lot more available than he really has ever been in the past.
I think it was his charity softball game, right?
Yeah.
His own,
For
gotta
sure.
show up for that.
Definitely got to show up for that. But it seems like a more open guy. It seems like a happier Justin Herbert. And you can't sit here and not think that Jim Harbaugh, being the head coach of the Chargers, being the guy that is steering the ship, doesn't have a huge impact on why Justin Herbert is feeling that way and feeling so excited, because we know Justin Herbert's not afraid of the work. He wants to work. He wants to go out there and be a perfectionist. He wants to go out there and do everything to the absolute best of his ability. We know he's an absolute monster in the gym, a guy that just does not stop. He does not quit. He is a little bit of a cyborg in that respect. And now we know that there is a head coach that has the acumen and also has the similar style to hopefully maximize Justin Herbert and get the most out of him. But he's been happy, and I'm excited to see what that pairing is going to do.
Yeah, and he gets paired up with a dude who is an NFL quarterback and a starting NFL quarterback for a long time. And it just feels like there's already such a good chemistry between those two. But, like, I want to see Jim Harbaugh going up and doing the J.J. McCarthy thing.
Yeah.
Pounding on his chest and just getting him hyped up. I'm excited to see what leadership looks like under Jim Harbaugh as opposed to what it looked like in the past with Justin Herbert, especially when you have guys like Rashawn Slater out here saying, like, hey, you don't know what kind of leader he is.
He is
a
quiet leader.
He will trash talk if he needs to. Like, he does do all these things. He just doesn't show it to you guys, so you don't think it happens. But it does feel like that's starting to peak out a little bit more under Jim Harbaugh, and it does feel like we're going to get to see it. But, like, me just even seeing that first interaction between Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert on the field in person in front of the public, like, that's an awesome moment. Like, that is, like, destiny coming together. That is chance and hope and Super Bowl aspirations. Like, you see those two together and you say, who's got it better than us, right? Absolutely.
Nobody.
So there's a lot I'm looking forward to on the first day of Chargers training camp. What Justin Herbert looks like in Greg Roman's offense, what his leadership looks like, how much fun he's having. Also, the golden jersey. I know anyone going to camp is very excited to see Justin Herbert rolling around there with his bright gold jersey, especially knowing that he hates it, right? Knowing that he absolutely does not want that thing on. But one of the biggest questions that will get answered, or at least will start to get answered on day one, who will his number one receiver be? Who is he going to click with the quickest? And I think that we're going to see some of that, and that is really who has a chance to thrive here. It's the pads aren't on, and to me, the focus on those days and who you're looking for and who can actually make a big impact, the wide receivers and pass catchers, including the tight ends, going up against the secondary in the coverage players. That is what I'm going to be focusing on the first few days of Chargers training camp, and you'll start to see what Christian Fulton looks like, who's Justin Herbert's number one guy, and much more, which we're going to get into on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys about Game Time because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier, and the prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer that it gets to first pitch. It's not just baseball. If you're going to Week 1 versus the Raiders, Jim Harbaugh with a chance to find revenge against the team that beat them 63-21, you're going to want to make sure you go to Game Time because there's probably going to be tickets that are up there. You're going to want to get good seats to it. And with Game Time, you know you're getting the Game Time guarantee where you know if you find on a different site tickets in the same row and section for less, you will get matched 110% of the difference. They also have all-in pricing where you can toggle that feature to show you upfront prices all the time so that you know when you get to check out, there's no surprises there because you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. David, let's continue getting into what we're so excited about as today means the first day of Chargers training camp. And make sure you guys are back here tomorrow as we break down the first day. David going to be hosting the show, and he will have a special guest on the show to talk about the first day of Chargers training camp. So that'll be a lot of fun because I'll be on paternity leave and am on paternity leave already as you're hearing this, right? Because it's pre-recorded. No, I'll talk about that. Let's get to other things we're excited about without pads because there's certain things like I can't evaluate Joe Alt on day one. Like it'd be nice to see him out there. But as Chris Ridden told us, if anyone tells you that Joe Alt's making significant progress when there's no pads on, they're BSing you.
They don't know what they're talking about. Yeah.
They don't. But there is a lot you can determine. There's a lot you can discern even without the pads on, David. And I think it starts with the DBs, with the pass catchers. And to me, one of the things, now that Keenan Allen is gone and Mike Williams is gone, who is Justin Herbert's number one guy? And we're going to see where that begins starting today.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of guys that want to throw their hat in that ring, right? And that want to establish that chemistry, like Ladd McConkey, like Joshua Palmer, who already has some established chemistry there, like DJ Chark, Brenden Rice. All of these guys want to get on the better side of Justin Herbert. They want to establish that chemistry. They want to be a guy that when Justin Herbert needs to make a play, that he can trust that you are going to go make that play for him. That starts in training camp. That starts before training camp practice, catching passes. That starts during practice and after practice when you're utilizing that time to try to build that chemistry and that camaraderie with your quarterback. It's so exceptionally important because if your quarterback trusts you and believes in you and knows that you're going to be where you're supposed to be, then Justin Herbert has showed many times that he does not care where you came from. If you got signed off the street, it doesn't matter. Justin Herbert will find you with the football. So this is the opportunity for somebody to step up and become the new number one wide receiver for the Chargers.
When you brought up that I'll throw it to anyone, even if somebody signed off the streets, it made me think of Alex Erickson, right?
Yeah.
Fairly or not, he was like his number one most trusted target for a little while last season, which says a lot about kind of the desperation they faced at that position at times last year. But yeah, we're going to see how much growth there's been from Quentin Johnston, right? We're going to see the Hayden Hurst and Justin Herbert connection. Maybe the number one guy isn't a receiver at all.
Maybe.
I'm excited to see that. But the one guy I feel confident, David, I'm going to say right now and plant my flag on it is like Ladd McConkey is going to be heard from before the start of next week when pads come on Monday, July 29th. Like the Ladd McConkey, Justin Herbert connection, even day one is something I'm very, very excited to see because to me, I just think he's going to be an instant creator, an instant impact player for this offense.
Well, I mean, we know what Ladd McConkey brings to the table. When you watch his tape, it's very, very clear. The guy has good hands. He's exceptionally quick, and he runs really crisp, very clean, and very accurate routes. So with that combination of skills that you're bringing to the table and the accuracy of a quarterback and the arm strength of a quarterback like Justin Herbert, that has match made in heaven type of potential there for those two players. It just feels like Ladd McConkey is in line to catch a ton of passes and be open a lot, and Justin Herbert's going to find him. And so I'm really excited to see how long it's going to take for that kind of marriage to kind of grow in front of our eyes. But I, like you, feel very confident that Ladd McConkey is going to have a big impact on this Chargers offense in year one as a rookie.
And I think another thing for me with the pass catchers is just like, will Josh Palmer be the best receiver like we think that he is?
Yeah.
Right. And will he just come out and be undenied? Right. Like, will he be just impossible to keep off the field or to be considered the number one wide receiver? Because if we're talking about talent and accomplishments and production recently, there's one guy that stands out as who you would think would be Justin Herbert's number one option. You'd think it'd be Josh Palmer. And we could see the start of that right now. And also, who at the bottom of the receiving depth chart is going to stand out, right? Because that's one of the biggest storylines going into is like Brenden Rice, Cornelius Johnson, Esime Fehoko, all potentially battling it out for one spot, probably maybe two spots. They have a chance right now. They don't have to wait for the Pats to come on to make an impact and get off to a great start. But switching over to the other side, David, first real look at Christian Fulton. And that's important to me because, first of all, it's like, okay, well, if he's struggling really badly against this specific group of receivers, we're going to have a lot of conflicts as far as like, okay, should I be really impressed by the receivers or is Christian Fulton, maybe that's an issue, right? Yeah. And I think that also, though, with a cornerback, with the faith they showed in him on the outside, he's going to be one of the guys I have my eyes on almost all the time.
Oh, for sure. And like we've talked about on previous shows is, if he's not good, then what do you do? Like, I mean, you're putting a lot of stock in his ability to bounce back. And yeah, he's still young and he does have good quality play on tape. But the last few seasons, injury riddled or not, the play on the field has not been great. And so he has to bounce back. He's being put in a premium kind of starting position. So he needs to show that he is the right man to resurrect his career. And he has plenty of incentive to do so, because if he does go out there and he does lock down opposing wide receivers, then he can earn himself a lot of money in free agency, because corners are always getting paid big, big money. And so Christian Fulton wants to be the next guy that went somewhere, resurrected his value, and cashed in.
And he figured the Chargers were his best chance to do that. Still a very young guy, a former second-round pick that was not in his draft class to potentially be a first-round pick from LSU. A guy that has a ton of potential and has played at a high level. And I think also gives you a better idea of what kind of receivers you're going to have, right? Like he will make your receivers better too if he's good. If you're just getting burnt left and right, it's probably not going to give you an accurate kind of representation of how good your receivers really are. So Christian Fulton and how he plays, getting to see him in this Chargers defense for the first time is something I'm most excited about, including talking about where he's going to be. Derwin James, where in the world is Derwin James? Where is he going to be lining up under Jesse Minter in this new defense? And also to me, David, when he is lining up in weird places on the edge or in the slot, wherever that is, who is the first person on the field behind him, taking up that spot on the back end?
Yeah, I mean, that's extremely important, because we know Derwin James is a freak athlete and a guy that you kind of want to impact the game in multiple different ways, because he has such a great skill set. Like, he can lock down your opposing tight ends. He can go out there and get coverage on a wide receiver occasionally, depending on the player. He can play back. He can rush the passer. He can do all of those things, but you can't feel comfortable that he can do all those things if the guys that you bring in to play on the back end are not doing their jobs and allowing Derwin to move around. Because if not, Derwin's not going to be able to move around. You're going to need him to play more back, because you're going to need that eraser. That's not the best use of Derwin James's talent. So yes, where is Derwin James and who is playing behind him is always going to be important, because I want to see Derwin James get back to the Derwin James we know he is capable of being, which is one of the top safeties in the NFL. And I think there's potential there to do that with Jesse Minter.
There absolutely is the potential. I mean, if the Chargers defense is going to reach the, places it wants to be, especially also just like if they want this to be a competent average to above average defense at the very least as a baseline level, you need Derwin James to be excellent. If you're talking about name brand value on that defense, it's Derwin James, it's Joey Bosa, it's Khalil Mack, and that's pretty much it. You need your stars to be stars.
Yeah.
You need Derwin James to return to his all-pro form, because if you can get that next to an ascending Alohi Gilman, now you're on to something. Now you have reason to believe that he can do something that the Brandon Staley regime just never was able to do. But for Jesse Minter, it starts with, how am I going to use Derwin James? How am I not going to overload what I'm putting on Derwin James's plate? And where do I need him the most because of the flaws I have elsewhere on this defense? All of those things start to get answered as early as day one, even before the pads get on. And he's one of the players where it's like either way he can excel. If the pads are off, he can excel. If the pads are on, he's going to excel as well. And you're just going to hear him a little bit louder because he's going to be putting pads on people. And that's what he loves to do. But David, I do want to talk about that because there's no pads now, but I do want to talk about who we're going to be looking at when the pads come on, because I think a lot of eyes are going to be on Joe Alt, but until we see him eat that Khalil Mack bull rush, we ain't going to know. And so we're going to talk about who is most important to see with the pads on and who kind of has the most at stake there, including seeing the improvements in Greg Roman's running game and much more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys about eBay Motors, because passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. At eBay Motors, they have everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Whether it's superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And the great thing about eBay Motors, you get eBay Guaranteed Fit, which means your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins this season. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. David, now I want to get into what we're going to be looking forward to on Monday, because it just doesn't feel right talking about training camp unless you talk about kind of the things that are really important at certain parts of training camp. And I wanted to talk about Joe Alt today, but it just doesn't make sense to do it unless you're talking about when the pads come on. And the pads come on Monday, July 29th. I hope I'm going to be out there for the first time. I have a baby now. I'm on maternity leave. Things got a little bit tougher on me. But that's what I'm hoping for, because I want to see Joe Alt, because I remember where I was when I saw Rashawn Slater and him going up against those guys on his rookie season. But I do want to make sure everyone is checking out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel, where you get live coverage around the clock from the local experts who cover their teams every day, giving you the best analysis out there. So make sure you guys are subscribing to Locked On Sports Today or finding them on the free Amazon TV Fire Channels app. David, Joe Alt, the first round pick, the 5th overall pick, even a controversial pick to some degree, right? We get to see him at training camp, but to me, it's not as important until July 29th, until the pads come on, which gave me the idea, hey, let's talk about the guys we can't wait to see with the pads on, because receivers, finesse players, corners, all you guys, whatever. I was a linebacker, another position you really want to see with the pads on. But for the first real look at Joe Alt, we need to see him in pads, and that's one of the things this training camp I'm most excited to see.
The game of football is played with the pads on, and that is where you can get the truest representation of what the skill set is for your offensive and defensive linemen. And whenever you invest a 5th overall pick in any player, it is exceptionally important, but even more important when that man is tasked with protecting your $260+ million quarterback the same year that he enters the NFL. So, and hey, the beautiful thing about it is we will get a very true representation of what his skill set is, because he's going to be going up against 3 or 4 premier pass rushers in the NFL. Joey Bosa, we know his handwork is pretty much legendary with what he does and how he is able to really embarrass opposing offensive linemen. When he is healthy, he is a menace. Khalil Mack is a monster. I mean, we saw it last year, 17 sacks, a guy that can run you completely over. Joe Alt is a huge man, 6'8", 320+ pounds. He has the skill sets, at least he showcased in college, but that was against college players. Now we're talking about the cream of the crop, the top of the line, the best of the best, and you will get tested. Joey Bosa said, we'll see what he is when I put my helmet in his chest.
And we'll see if Joey Bosa's helmet can get up to Joe Alt's chest. Now, I mean, they're both behemoths.
Joey he's
Bosa's
6'5"
bigger
himself,
than people
so.
think. He ain't 6'8", 6'9", though,
Nah.
which is what Joe Alt is. And I'm super excited to see it. But I do think it is also super beneficial to him that he gets 4 very different pass rushers, like you said, to go up against. Because Bud Dupree, Thule, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, they all have a very different style. And he's going to get to see a lot of different pro-level edge rushers that are going to be coming at him, which is going to be that much more important when you get Max Crosby in week 1 and TJ Watt in week 3. And I think the other thing that you're hoping to see, too, is not just, the transition to the right side and your first real look at that, but also how physical he is in the running game and moving people out of the way, because between him and Trey Pipkins, you think you could get some big holes on that side. So that's the other thing that once the pads come on, I'm really, really looking forward to looking at the Chargers running game. Miss me with any run that happens between now and July 29th when the first day pads come on. You're not going to know anything about the running game till the season starts, but the next best thing is when the pads come on and we see how physical this offensive line looks in person.
I mean, hey, we've seen a different running game the last few years with a running back that was more of a pass catcher with Austin Eckler. I mean, Austin Eckler was a pretty good running back in between the tackles, but this is going to be a completely different ball game. This is going to be a much more physical, a much more diverse rushing attack, something that we frankly have not seen, since the LT, Marty Schottenheimer, style of I formation days, right? And I think
Anthony Lynn probably tried to do that for a little bit, but it was just a disaster.
Yeah, it just didn't work. But, you had to have the right players and you had to have, the right people orchestrating, that rushing attack. And, Greg Roman, he does that. Top 10 rushing attacks everywhere that he goes. He's going to get very creative with it, and it's going to be effective. I want to see how effective it's going to be and how much weight it takes off of Justin Herbert's shoulders so he can throw some more wide open throwing windows.
Absolutely. And I think also, where we get to see Will Dissly get involved in a big way for the first time. What does this 5 offensive linemen plus Will Dissly combination looks like as far as moving people out of the way? Get to see the physicality of a Gus Edwards once the pads come on, and also just get to see kind of where the chemistry level is on this offensive line, because the run game is so much of it has to do with how much chemistry you have and making sure everybody is hitting the right person and getting to the spots at the right time. Yeah. One of the biggest reasons why the Chargers run game hasn't worked out in recent years, and one of the big things I'm going to be looking for once I see that group of 5 getting together, plus the wide receivers and the tight ends and how they make an impact in it too. But how in sync that offensive line is going to be huge, because it was just absolutely derailed. And the other thing is too, is like, it's going to be hard not to buy in and get super excited for this running game, because like even in the preseason, even if we see big numbers, like let's not forget Kellen Moore's new and improved Chargers offense ran it up 2 of the 3 games for like 250 plus yards. Yeah. So we won't really know. But Greg Roman also comes with a different kind of pedigree in this regard. And I'm just so excited because we know when he shows up, he turns you into a top 10 running offense. I'm excited to see what that looks like. And the first day in pads, I think, is the first time we're going to get a little glimpse of that going into this before we go into the season. But it's also important for the defensive side of things, David, and I think there are certain defensive positions where, again, you can't get a full appreciation for them unless you're seeing them in pads.
Absolutely. 2 positions that come to mind, obviously the people that are going against the offensive line, the defensive line.
Anything in the trenches, yeah.
Anything in the trenches, very, very important. The linebackers, that's definitely another position. I mean, a lot of youth in that room, besides Denzel Perriman there. So I want to see how they click. I want to see how they're picking up the defense, how comfortable they are, if they're making plays. I want to see what that safety rotation is going to look like, and if they're making plays. Like, it's definitely extremely important on the defensive line, though, most importantly for me, because that's where I have the most question marks. I want to see them do well, but it's a lot of youth in that room, so they're going to have to figure out that rotation and see if they're going to be able to provide some competent play for Jesse Minter's defense.
Yeah, the trenches where it starts, offensive and defensive line is always most important once you get the pads on. I remember I asked Brandon Staley, like, what do you get before the pads are on for the offensive defensive line? And Chris Rudham told me he was basically BSing me because he was telling me all this stuff. But, you can't really tell until they get the pads on. But JT Woods, of course, if we're talking about tackling, if we're talking about putting the pads on, we're talking about who that's important for, the most, super athlete that really all he's missing, the biggest thing he's missing is tackling, is JT Woods. Not that he's going to be able to tackle people to the ground even in training camp, but that's where he can show, the technique and that part of his game can improve, and that he can show that he's a different player now, because the version we saw before just isn't playable. Yeah. And then the linebackers should be able to show some things in coverage. I'm excited to see Junior Colson in coverage today, right? Or even Deion Henley in coverage today. But until you fill a run fit, until you step up into the hole and meet Gus Edwards in there, you're not really going to know if you have a linebacker or how good your linebackers are going to be. Linebacker is a physical position. I played it. It's the position I'm most familiar with, right? And you have to love it. You have to kind of be a sicko to play it, and you can't shy away from contact ever. And that is one of the things that I'm super excited about once the pads come on. First of all, Denzel Perriman, don't hurt anyone on your own team. He's going to be a bullet in making tackles for loss, and it's hard for him to change speeds.
But
right?
Make sure to stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated, Gatorade all the way. But for Deion Henley and Junior Colson and the physicality and the linebackers and getting better play from them, as far as when we're going to see that, July 29th, when the pads come on. So just certain positions much more important than others. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. things are going to change for the next week. I'm going to come on the show as many times as I can as a special guest to talk about practice. I'm going to try to get out to practice on my paternity leave since I'm getting days off, as many as I can. This is the last day because we recorded this over the weekend as a host of the show. David will be taking over as the main host for the next 7 shows. So make sure it still is your team every day. We're still going to have a show for you every day. And if it's not me here special guesting, we will have someone, a beat reporter or someone who is at practice watching it that day, whether it's Daniel Popper or Chris Rim, Jeff Miller of the LA Times. We're going to cast a lot of nets out there and try to bring you guys the most comprehensive training camp coverage as we possibly can as I'm hanging out with a baby somewhere. But we will not let that stop us from bringing you a show every single day. So to make sure you guys don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on our social media. You can find us on Twitter at LockedOnLAC, me on Twitter at DanTalkSports, and David Drogemeyer at DroTalkSD, as well as the show's page on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. Things will be a little bit different, but training camp is here, and we will still be covering with you guys every single day. And you know, this offseason, there's no better place to get your Chargers offseason coverage. So we'll be back with you guys tomorrow, recapping the first day of Chargers training camp. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.